Welcome to a special edition of the Super Parent Podcast, where I'm your host, Dr. Nick Fanning, and joining me today is Kathy Bourque, entrepreneur, thought leader, spouse, mom, and speaker. She has been hard at work for the past 25 years managing business and restaurants, serving on several boards of directors and creative teams, and has owned and operated 3 different successful businesses, and honestly has one of the most creative marketing group called Rock Your Culture that I've ever seen. She has found her passion on the stage, speaking and empowering people to find the leader within, and she is now my guest on the Super Parent Podcast. So do your best and remove any distractions here, because we're about to blow your mind.
Parenting in the 21st century is ever evolving, and while you balance work, kids, and your sanity, it's easy to feel discouraged. Welcome to the Super Parent Syndrome with your host, Dr. Nick Fanning.
Hey, beautiful parents out there. This is Dr. Nick Fanning again, and I have my first interview here with Kathy Bourque. And the whole point for today is you have a lot on your plates. And I know if you have kids, if you have a job, if you have coworkers, if you have a spouse, you have stress and you have doubts and you have fears. And I am here to tell you, you are not alone. So, Miss Kathy, you've heard the introduction. Is there anything you want to expand on that as far as about you?
Just reiterating the fact that what you just said, you are not alone. We are all there. No matter how successful people look, everyone has those doubts and fears, and they just need to be mindful of that and still use that to step into their power.
Absolutely. And folks, it's not going to take you long to understand why I wanted Kathy to join us today. Kathy is a mom. She's in the working force. She is involved in many, many facets, and she's in the trenches with us. She understands what's going on here. And so, Kathy, I was particularly just honestly drawn to have you on the show for one big reason. And we talked a little bit about that, but why don't you tell everybody about your newest projects and your newest things?
My newest project is teaching everyone that there is a leader inside them, whether they think that or not. My premise is that if you have any kind of communication with a spouse, with a loved one, with a team, employees, children, whatever, then you're a leader. Mm-hmm. And it's what Drew Dudley likes to call everyday leadership in his TED Talk, that sometimes we put leadership in such a huge capacity, we put it up on a pedestal, mm-hmm. and actually it's in those little moments, those everyday moments, that you influence someone else's life, and that's what leadership is, influence. So that's my big project right now, is talking to people about what's your story and how is it holding you back.
Right. And why were you so drawn to go down this path, this journey, and what's really drawn you to get to this topic particularly?
This topic is near and dear to my heart because for the longest time, my story was holding me back. I had the big imposter complex that I think a lot of people who are trying to do big things go through, mm-hmm. but mine was really keeping me from being myself. I just graduated from college in December of last year, and I was on several boards of directors, and they asked me to put together a bio. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but sitting on a board of directors with physicians and lawyers and accountants and bankers, they have education. Right. So it kind of just created that imposter complex in me to rear its head. And I was struggling in my business because I was overcompensating. And when you overcompensate, then you get overcommitted and then you get stressed out. And I was stressed to the max, and I finally decided I had to stop and I had to do something about it.
Right. Perfect. And I got to tell you guys, again, we're hitting right into it, but as you can see just how authentic she really is about this, and you're not alone out there. I know I'm going to ask her to really get into this imposter complex. And if you're not currently going through this, I know you have fears about going through this. So Kathy, do you mind talking a little bit more what you mean about that imposter complex?
Yeah, I think anytime you go to change something or do something different or maybe bigger in life, put yourself out there, you may start to feel like a fraud. Everybody goes through that, where they have those fears that, am I going to be good enough? Am I extroverted enough? Am I, whatever, you fill in the blank, whatever it is, enough. Right. And that just creates that imposter complex.
Absolutely. I think even as a parent, you're just like, am I being a good enough parent? Am I doing everything I need to do? That by itself.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And now you add into business, but then also rolling with the leagues. Yeah, there. So I totally get you.
Totally with parenting too. There are so many times my sisters and I joke about being the loser mom because you do doubt yourself. You doubt some of your decisions. And as you know, I've only got one kid.
Right.
So it's like, I've only got one chance at this. I can't screw it up. I got to do this right. Yeah. So definitely pops up in parenting.
Good. Well, as you've been researching this imposter complex and going through this growth and this journey, any big things that have kind of stuck out in your mind, or any kind of plateaus that you were able to bust through as you're doing this growth that you want to share?
Well, yeah. So the way it affected me most in business was, like I told you, when I was asked for my bio, and it was like, oh my gosh, they're going to find out I don't have my education yet. So what that led to in business, I was trying all these things, as most businesses do at year 5 or so, and I really got kind of scattered. So the first thing I did was took a business plan course, thinking that would get me back on track. After that didn't really help, so I took some leadership courses that were more on networking, but it finally led to a leadership development course, and that's where I had my aha moment. My teacher just kind of looked at me and he said, you're holding yourself back. He's like, you just need to show up and be who you are. He said, set some intention to how you're showing up, and things will start to change. And sure enough, the minute you start to become aware and take that time to pause and really look at what you're stressing about, and then just decide that you're going to show up and be who you are, people respond to that. People respond to that connection, to that authenticity that we talked about. So
that's awesome. What changes did you see?
Well, it's funny because I always felt before like I just wasn't being heard sometimes, especially in meetings, or maybe I wasn't even speaking up. I think there were times I wasn't even speaking up. As you know, that is not me at all. I'm a very expressive person. I'm a very pat you on the back if I think you need it type of person. And as soon as I started being that bubbly, outgoing me that I am, even in these reserved board meetings, people were like, oh, Kathy, let's ask Kathy, let's get Kathy's thoughts. And you just have more impact when you are true to your nature and when you're really being true to yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously we have these fears and doubts every once in a while that kind of pop back up. What gets you back on purpose? What brings you back to reminds you to make sure that you're being the authentic version of you versus because we have these pressures and everybody tries to push you back into that box of where they think you should be. What are some things that you do to make sure that you stay in line or congruent with that?
Well, one of the first things I spent a lot of time with, and this is in the workbook that's on my website, one of the first things I did was really looked at what my core values are.
Love it.
What is it that speaks to me? Where do I feel like I shine? What things come naturally to you that you enjoy, that sort of thing. So really digging into that first and foremost to get that good solid base, or that core. That's why they're called core values.
Right, yeah.
So that good solid core. And then after that, it's creating a practice of stopping and becoming aware. So mindfulness, just taking some time to do that.
Slowing down.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any rhythms or rituals that you do on a day-to-day basis to kind of make sure that you do take time to get back to center, to increase that mindfulness that you spoke of, or even review the core values?
Well, I've tried meditation. I'm not great at it, but sometimes, it's just one of those taking even 2 to 3 minutes a day.
Absolutely.
In the morning. But I try it also during the day. Like I tried taking a deep breath. But one of the best practices, I read a book called The Artist Way by Julia Cameron.
Okay.
And in that, she talks about journaling in a way that is so quick and fast that sometimes you can't even read your journal, but you're just spitting everything out that's coming to your mind.
Right.
And it works extremely well for me because I'm bright, shiny object syndrome person. I'm the one that says, squirrel, and I run after it. So for me, it's a great brain dump. And it also shows me, okay, you got all that out of the way. Now, what was it that you want to focus on?
Right. Awesome. Now, I know you work with a lot of people and a lot of companies, especially in North Platte or in my area as well. What have you seen in some of the clients or even in some of your mastermind groups as well as you try to bring these points to them? So I know that you mentioned in the board itself, but have you been able to help other people reach this, this new state of mindfulness too, or even just point them in the right direction?
Well, yeah. And the funny thing about mindfulness is that when you tell people how much it could benefit them, then they start to beat themselves up about about meditation or, I can't do it, I'm no good at it. Mm-hmm. Well, for one, you should never worry about if you're good at it or not. And it doesn't have to be the sit down om type of thing, It can definitely be just when you're sitting at a stoplight, just actually looking around and seeing everything around you and just really looking at your kid when they're talking to you instead of trying to cook dinner and trying to get everything ready for the school day or whatever, but actually just like looking them in the face and having that one-on-one conversation with them sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those little moments like that they add up. They're huge.
Absolutely. And gosh, we could go in millions of different directions on what you just said there. In fact, folks, I would say that I would challenge you, my own personal challenge for you guys is even when you're waiting to pick up your kids from school, why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes of just sitting there and really focus on what you want that interaction to be, and how are you going to set that stage when your child crawls in, or even before your feet touch the floor in the morning. What are you going to do? What are you going to meditate? What are you going to be grateful about? And setting the stage for the rest of your day there too. And so just a little bit of purposeful intention right off the bat can make such a big difference. And Kathy's just really hit the point right on the head here and talked about some of that stuff there and real life applications there. And folks, I got to tell you, present time consciousness, put down the phones, get rid of the distractions, because imagine what that can do as far as your relationships go. I mean, honestly, with your kids, with your spouse, with your clients especially. So where else have you really expanded this? I mean, obviously it's your personal philosophy, so it's probably everywhere, but have you noticed anywhere else some of the benefits with this?
Well, it's funny because when you start practicing it and take those little moments, like you said, put the cell phones down. Yeah. It's just funny how different things go. So I started out, like I said, in business, and I would just start before every big meeting I went into and say, okay, how do I want to be? Not even what I want to get out of it.
Right.
My intention was just how do I want to act and how do I want to be experienced? So when I interact with you, Nick, how do I want you to feel when I leave? Right. How do I want you to experience, I call it my leadership, but how do I want you to experience my presence? Mm-hmm. And so the same thing, and unfortunately, I believe we are the worst at this at home. Yeah. Because, that's when we let our hair down or whatever, right. And I'm included in that. I'm probably the worst person with my husband. I'm really good with my son about giving him the time, but I really have to sometimes think about it with my husband that, you know what, I want him to know that I care about him and that I love him and that I support him, instead of just being that little
the dump at the end of the day, like I totally understand.
Yeah. And especially when we owned a business together, and it was very hard not to talk business all the time or not to talk Cameron all the time. So just trying to focus again on each other and how do I want him to feel when I've left the room, or when I've, how do I want him to feel my presence?
I love that. So you'd almost say that, you do a really good job identifying those roles and then making sure that you have the an intention for every single one.
Right.
That's awesome. Do you do that with clients too, I assume?
Oh, heavens, yes.
Absolutely. So this can carry us forward for a lot of really great things here. Okay. Well, give me an example, because here's the thing. If you think about our typical listener right now, our typical listener is either probably taking a bathroom break right now, and there's a little hand poking underneath the door, or they're on their commute, and they're trying to get to work, and they're trying to get as much as they can in just a short amount of time. And we've have in the past experienced the go 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 go, and what you're saying is that we got to slow it down, put our heart and soul into every interaction, and really see where this takes us. So any big tips or any big things that you would really strive as far as somebody really starting off and doing this?
Well, absolutely. So I'm sitting here smiling because I agree with everything he just said. Part of the things, like I read one time that the reason cigarette smoking is such a hard habit to break is because it's not only the nicotine, the drugs, and all that, but the fact that it's giving those people that downtime, that time to breathe and to sit there and just decompress for a minute. So I think any little ritual you can make. So if it's your first morning cup of coffee, if it's a stretch when you get out of bed, if it's anything, just shrugging your shoulders up and down a few times, doing those why things you taught me. I don't know what those are, but yeah, any type of ritual that you can incorporate into your day in little moments, something to get your mind back to like here, snap it back in, you know, maybe it's a snap, maybe it's
it could be, right?
Those people that wear the rubber bands and snap yourself. I don't know. Yeah, something like that.
I'm sure there's an app on your phone, right? Because if we're not addicted enough, I'm sure there's something to bring you back to it. Hey,
oh, yeah.
Put me down. You know?
Totally.
How have you, especially as a mom, how have you been able to, impress upon this type of philosophy or in this type of intention even to your own son? Is it something that you do verbally, or are you more just showing by example, or how are you setting the stage for him?
Oh, I try to do it verbally. I try to do it by example, both. He will probably end up in therapy one day because he's always telling me, Mom, no more psychology crap. But, you know, part of it is in the being intentional. Like, we'll go on walks, and this happened just a couple weekends ago when we were on a walk, and he was just complaining the whole time. And so I finally just said, you know, we're walking. We're already doing it. Right. Just take a minute and breathe, and let's think in a different way. You know, so some of it leads right into mindset, of course, too, about how you can enjoy the walk and how can that help you de-stress? You know, just your mindset about it, just changing your mindset about taking a minute instead of thinking you don't have that time because you're so stressed and so harried, looking forward to it and saying, I just need this minute because it's going to make me a better mom or a better dad or a better whatever.
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this is just gold right here. You talk about those little rituals and those little moments, especially at home, but then also pressing upon to your son. And I love that fact that you're, like you said, just take a moment. We're already doing it, and to go forth with it. I know you have a couple big projects coming up, and you're doing some speaking as well. How are you relating? I assume you're going to be talking about this at those, right?
Absolutely.
So any like teasers, especially because I know you have a couple seminars. I'd love for you to drop some information, basically on the one in McCook and also the one in Portland too. But what are some of the big things you're going to be discussing there?
Well, it starts with that imposter complex and how our stories hold us back, and then I move right into why it matters to be intentional and why it matters to be authentic. Because anytime you're trying to connect with others and communicate with them, if you're not being on purpose to who you are, again, so intention only takes you so far. You can set your intention, but if it's not in line with who you are, so that's why doing that core value work makes so much sense first. If you have one without the other, then you're just not in alignment from your inner to your outer.
Right.
It just makes no sense as a leader or as a person. So a perfect example is, say you decide, you know what, I'm going to be this laid back person all the time. I am just going to be so laid back at home. I'm just going to be happy-go-lucky, and you're not that way. Say you're a type A personality. Right. Your intention is good, but if it's not in line with who you are, then pretty soon you start to get irritated, you start to get a little worked up, everything starts rubbing you the wrong way because you're letting things slide that you really want to say something about, and then pretty soon you blow. You know, so it makes no sense. And that's the same with being a leader. If you're a type A personality, run with it. That doesn't mean you can't be compassionate. It doesn't mean you can't be caring. And again, going back to the mindful thing.
Right.
But so intention only goes so far. You have to make sure it's authentic to you.
Right.
That's where I go with that. And then I just end up giving people some tips on how to implement that into their lives. And again, it starts with the awareness. So creating some sort of practice that you can do daily basis or in between those moments when you have a minute, especially if you're a parent, you are constantly running around and then waiting for your kid. So use that time. Use that time productively.
I love it. I call them time vampires. So the example of like waiting in line for a coffee versus if you just made your own or called ahead and had it pre-ordered. Little things like that can make you, get those little times back, so you have open and opportunities for those intentional moments. I love that. Kathy, you're right on board there. So the big thing is you talk about setting our core values and making sure we have our intention set. Any resources that you have that you would say that, like, hey, these are ones that we need to that you need to check out?
Well, so one thing that is a really good tool is when your mind is getting carried away from you, or when that imposter complex is holding you back, stop and ask yourself, is that the truth? Byron Katie has an excellent website called thework.com.
Okay.
And she's got a 4-step process for any of those stories that are going through your head that are holding you back. So, and a good story is, I'm stressed, I'm too busy, well, is that the truth? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
So many times we've been telling ourselves for so long, but is it really the truth? Could somebody else look at your life and say, no, I don't think so. You know, so is it the truth? Ask yourself that. And then just sit with the answer and feel it and explore it and look at it without being judgmental. We're so compassionate for other people and so hard on ourselves, or at least
Absolutely.
I am.
Absolutely.
So that's the hardest thing, even when you meditate or when you get mindful, or even in yoga. Sometimes I'm like sitting there going, oh, I need to be stretching harder. That's not the purpose of yoga at all.
Right.
And it's not the purpose of meditation to sit there and berate yourself because you can't meditate. Right. So sit with whatever your thoughts are, your feelings are. So when you ask that question, is it the truth? Just look at the answer and try to be as objective about it as possible. Right. So, and then after that, then reset your intention back to your core values and then start it all over. It's a practice. It takes time, and it's a daily thing.
It is, and probably even minutely thing, because gosh, if we listen to those demons inside of us, we would never get anything done.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's so hard. We can have a child say, I hate you, and all of a sudden you just think you're like the worst parent ever. And if you allow yourself to go down that circle, that's gonna be rough. But again, you have to like say, okay, really, I'm not the worst parent ever. I'm just not letting them have ice cream 3 times a day.
Right.
So that's huge. I love that, especially when we really think about those stories that really hold us back aren't really so much, it's just most of the time it's just blatantly untrue.
Right.
Yeah. And yet we have to reprogram ourselves.
Right.
Over and over and over again.
And mindset plays such a huge part in all of that. And so then if mindset plays a big part in that, then you have to back it up even another step, because what are the things that can influence your mindset? And it's things like when you're tired, when you're hungry. We've all seen the Snickers commercial about where you're hungry and you become a monster.
Right.
And it's true. So making sure your nutrition is right and you're sleeping good and you're physically fit enough to where your mindset can be in a really good place. Makes a difference.
They also say the top 5 people that you spend your most time with influences that core belief as well.
Absolutely.
They say you make as much, or you have that same kind of stuff like that. Since you've taken this new mindset on, how has your social circle changed?
Well, it's interesting because for the most part, I just am very conscious of who I do choose to surround myself with and who I spend time with. And even with, I've worked with some people who have had to fire customers or fire clients, because there comes a point where if you can't help them and they're just frustrating you more, then are they really worth it? And are they worth your headspace?
Exactly.
So you do have to become conscious of that, and the situations that you can find yourself in, being very proactive about that instead of reactive, and trying to make sure that you find yourself in the right place.
Beautiful. So I'll say that even with my core values, I use it to determine if I'm going to accept a client or not, even. And sometimes, when you have to, it takes some guts, and it's tough at first, but then even making sure that you hold yourself to that kind of standard too, because, if they're going to be in violation of your core values, are you really doing your best work?
Right.
No, right.
Yeah. And, if you're a people pleaser, like I was, I still am somewhat, that is a hard thing. Because you really want to try and change them. I want them to like me. I want them to get along, but there comes a point when you just have to say, why am I getting worked up about this? I don't really even want to surround myself with people like that anyhow. So I don't mean it in a negative way. I just mean it in a very positive, be proactive about where you find yourself, both physically and mentally.
Love it. Well, Kathy, I've really enjoyed our time together so far. But at the same time, we have people that have things to do and places to go. So let's wrap this up in a nice, tidy little package here. If you had to summarize everything we talked about today and your big action steps, what would you suggest to people to really get started with this new, I guess, internal philosophy and this new intention? What do you have like a couple steps here, or any big top things that you'd suggest?
Definitely. So the first one is just always ask yourself, how do you want to show up? Set your intention. How do you want your presence to be felt? How do you want it to be experienced? And the way to do that is get those core values, work through those, then work in those little times of awareness, of mindfulness.
Right.
Take those minutes you have in between things and just use them to ask yourself, is this really me? Is this where I want to be? Is this how I want to be experienced? And then tweak accordingly.
Love it. That's very real. You're absolutely right. It's not, you don't have your 2 rules for success or anything like that. It's just very real. This is very plain and simple. And guys, you don't have to make it more complicated than that. And however, I do know, Kathy, that you are generous to give the listeners a gift. Can you tell them a little bit more about that? What you have for them?
Absolutely. If you want to go to kathybourque.com, it's KATHYBOURQUE.com, and just sign up for my email list. There is a 40-page guidebook that will walk you through a lot of this. Yeah, I put a lot of time and effort in it, but I wanted it to be worthwhile to people.
Oh, yeah.
So it walks you through, first of all, setting up what are your core values, finding what makes you you, and then running with it and going right through everything we just talked about today.
Love it. And folks, I'm going to have that in the show notes. So even if you have your iPhone out, you can expand on the notes there, and you can click right onto it so you can get down to there. So that's one of those things I would say is do it now. Don't wait. And folks, if you think about it, if there was anything that you could totally to pivotally change things right now, it would be obviously your core values, your core being, because this saying goes, be, do, have. You can't do and you can't have until you actually figure out who you're going to be. And so this is one of those big things that we're going to touch upon, that we've touched upon today. So I challenge you, go to our website, download this amazingly free gift of 40 pages, and really just dive in deep. Get a glass of wine, whatever it takes there, and enjoy it and make a process of it. Kathy, I'm actually blown away by your gift. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, so, definitely.
If people are also interested, is there any other resources or ways they can get a hold of you if they really feel drawn to you?
Well, yeah, I'm on Twitter. Okay. So it's one Kathy Bourque is my handle there, and I'm on Facebook, and I think that is Kathy Bourque Leadership Design.
Okay.
And then, I'm doing a workshop in McCook on April 21st called Power and Peace, doing that with Meg Hoover out of North Platte, and that's going to be a whole different type of leadership based a lot on what we've talked about today.
Perfect. Who's the ideal person to go to that?
Oh, well, I would love to say anyone, but I would say anyone who's ready to actually incorporate some of these things we've talked about. Anyone who's ready to help themselves be more focused, be more present, because we're going to do a lot of that type of work in the day-long workshop. So that type of person.
Love it. So if you're really ready for change, guys, if you know that you've been holding yourself back, and especially if you've been listening to the demons inside and you need to change that inner story, I say that this is probably the event for you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Any last things, Kathy?
No, I don't think so. Just go out there and be you. Be awesome. You.
Well, I've actually had such an amazing time for this. It was such a great experience. I think my cheekbones or my smile muscles are going to be aching from this because I've just been nodding up and down and been so excited for that. And folks, I got to tell you, thank you so much for your time. I know time is valuable and precious, especially when you're with kids and with work and everything that's going on about with you. And I don't think that, and I think you'll agree with me here when you'll say that this was time well spent. So Kathy, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Super Parent Syndrome. Please be sure to visit peptalksforparents.com for more content and our free newsletter. And remember, you are not alone.